She probably doesn't belong in the Bible at all. Her story interrupts the flow of its context if placed at the end of John chapter 7 and the beginning of John chapter 8. Her story has too much context of its own to match the style of John's book. Her story is excluded from early manuscripts of John's Gospel. Other manuscripts include her story, but only in part, or in a different place in John, or in a Gospel other than John's. There's just a lot of reasons to think that her story doesn't belong in the Bible. But we're all inheritors of the tradition of the King James Bible, and the King James Bible definitely includes her story, so all modern English translations have to acknowledge that and include her story and footnote it appropriately, indicating that her story probably doesn't belong in the Bible, but here it is anyway. So, here it is anyway. In the temple in Jerusalem, Jesus taught the people. And those who wanted to be the ones to teach the people instead, the Pharisees and teachers of the law, wanted to test Jesus and reveal him to the people as a charlatan and a heretic. And they happened to have a woman recently caught in the sin of adultery. Whether she was married or not, she had been caught having sex with someone who was not her husband, and the law of Moses called for such women to be stoned to death. So they brought her to Jesus to test him. Would he uphold the law of Moses and watch a woman be brutally executed in the temple courts? Or would he show the mercy he was becoming so well known for and violate the law of Moses? The story that probably doesn't belong in the Bible tells us that Jesus saw her and heard their accusation of her and their test for him, and he didn't engage. He said nothing. He stooped down and began writing in the dirt on the ground. They weren't having that, and they pestered him for a response, and whether he actually said this or not, we just don't know, but the words of Jesus that probably don't belong in the Bible are, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." And no one did, which to me is the most damning evidence against this story. The whole point of the test was that they had found a sinner because they didn't consider themselves to be sinful. But in the story that probably doesn't belong in the Bible, her accusers and Jesus' testers were ashamed, and they left, one by one, until Jesus and the woman were alone. And Jesus finally addressed her. He asked, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" But probably he didn't. And she responded, "No one, sir." But probably she didn't. And Jesus said, "Then neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin." Except, not. And this story that probably doesn't belong in the Bible because it probably never happened, could it be any more about what didn't happen? Jesus doesn't condemn her. No one did. No one threw a stone. No one stuck to the plan. No one held Jesus to the test. No one obeyed the laws of Moses. Jesus didn't directly address their question after not addressing them at all. She didn't get away with her sin and did present the Pharisees with a trap for Jesus. That didn't work. All of that not happening in a story that probably never happened. Which makes the adulterous woman of Not John 8 the perfect stand-in for us all. Because of Jesus, it's as if our sin never happened. Because he was brutally executed, not just by petty people, but by God, we won't be. Because he wrote our names in the book of life, he has lifted us out of the dirty filth of our sin, not condemned, because he was for us. Her story probably doesn't belong in the Bible. It maybe didn't even happen. And still, It is a story of the mercy for which Jesus is rightfully known, finding a sinner who deserved and expected far worse. And that is the story of the Bible, because it did happen. Jesus' mercy found you. You and I are dust and breath, loved by God, bought by Jesus. This podcast is written and produced by me, Ethan Cherney, a WELS pastor serving Our Savior Lutheran Church in Pomona, California. Get in touch on Facebook at Dust and Breath Pod, on Twitter at Dust Breath Pod, or by emailing dustandbreathpod@gmail.com. Outro music arranged and performed by Mr. Peter Shawy, who is like gold refined 7 times. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you could leave a review in iTunes or just share an episode on social media, I'd really appreciate it. It's the only way other people can find the show. Now, go do what God made you to do. Be who God called you to be. Go see what God can do with dust and breath and faith in Jesus, his Son.